Hey, thanks for joining us for This Week in Jacksonville Business Edition. Returning guest for us, it's Mark Wilson, President and CEO of the Florida Chamber of Commerce and Foundation. Thanks so much for being back with us. I think a lot's probably changed. It's been, my recollection is at least a year since we got to visit. Maybe it's been more recently, but I just would love to start by having you share with us where you feel like Florida's economy is. And I know that we got a lot to talk about in this episode.
Yeah, Kent. Hey, it's great to be with you again. And it might have been a year, but it certainly doesn't seem that long. And I'll tell you one thing that's the same is I think I told you back then, if Florida was a stock, I'd be investing as much as I could in this state called Florida. And even though things are different now around the world, Florida is still number one in so many categories. And I hope we get to talk about that today. But again, if Florida was a stock, I'd be investing in it. If Jacksonville and Northeast Florida was a mutual fund, I would certainly have Northeast Florida in this mutual fund called Florida.
So obviously that's a pretty optimistic viewpoint or a positive viewpoint. What are some of the things that the state of Florida, and maybe even go a little more granular with this, Northeast Florida, what are the things that are being done well to see us in this positive light?
Yeah, so one of the things that we laid out years ago is, if we look at Florida and we think, the world's global now. So you've got people across the country talk about Jacksport and how important Jacksport is as a leading port on the eastern seaboard. And I know we'll talk today about manufacturing and how can we make more in Florida and how can we export more. You've got a great airport, a great seaport. Obviously, with 95 and 10, you're at the intersection of a lot of commerce. And one thing that Northeast Florida has done is you've really focused on talent and focused on workforce. And so I'm on our state's economic development board, and we talk about, in fact, we were just in Northeast Florida earlier this month at the port there, talking about how Northeast Florida's economy is growing and doing the right things. When we've got a consistent tax structure, we're making our litigation climate better. We have 67 counties, 411 cities, but the state of Florida continues to improve our regulatory framework. A lot of people are noticing. And Kent, you remember when we were all younger and we all played sports and people, we would point to the scoreboard and say, how are we doing? If we look at the scoreboard, Florida is number one in the country for business relocations. We have almost 4 times as many businesses on a net basis relocating to Florida as Texas, about 3 times as many as Tennessee. We're number one in the country. So that's a pretty important metric. We're also number one in the country for new business startups. So we passed Texas, we passed New York, we passed California. So when you have both of those things happening, we obviously have created a magnet where local businesses want to expand and start up here in Florida.
So, of course, the question that follows is, well, why? Is it because of the regulatory environment? Are there other things that make this so attractive to people in terms of startups or moving their businesses to the state?
Yeah, I think, Ken, it starts with, people want to visit Florida. And people want to move to Florida. And so if you think about it, 10% of Canadians visit Florida every single year. And if you think about it, we're the number one tourist destination in the world. And as I've said for years, a lot of people work 50 weeks a year so that they can spend 2 weeks a year in this place we call Florida. And I think what's happening is a lot of people are realizing, hey, why not move to Florida earlier? And why not have your family and career in Florida? We have, top 3 school system in the country. We have the number 1 rated colleges and university system in the country, by the way, for 10 years in a row. We're one of only 6 states with no personal income tax. We have more jobs in Florida that are open than people looking for work. So we have an abundance of good jobs. About half, by the way, do not require a 4-year degree. So, we have a great university system, a great college system, and we have all kinds of career opportunities and education opportunities for people who want to work and want to live in a great place like Florida.
Yeah, those are some of the things that make it so fun to do this podcast, to cover this as a topic.
Right.
For our news organization is that the workforce is being developed, that there are work opportunities, that there is growth happening. And Mark, since you were here recently in the area, you can see we see right across the river from where our TV station is development happening, a Four Seasons Hotel, other development. All of that can be really exciting. It can also be, I guess, really scary to some people that don't really say, I want a lot of growth. There is a lot of growth happening in the state of Florida. And I think one of the things we talked about last time, Mark, is you said, hey, we've got a goal. We want Florida to be able to be the 10th largest economy, not in the United States, in the world. Where does
Right.
that stand? How are we doing on achieving that goal?
Yeah, thanks so much for asking. And when I just look at Duval County as an example, Duval County needs to create about 75,000 private sector jobs between now and 2030. So, we'd love to see every county commission meeting, every economic development meeting, start off with what do we need to do in Duval County to create 75,000 more private sector jobs by 2030. So that's the kind of thing we're doing in all 67 counties. But to answer your question, in 2018 and 2019, the Florida Chamber Foundation invested a few $1 million in a research initiative called the Florida 2030 Blueprint. And what it said, Kent, it said Florida's going to add about 2.7 million more people by 2030. And as we sit here today, Kent, you're asking for an update. As we sit here today, we need to add about 1.3 million new jobs in Florida by 2030. And where we stand is if Florida was a country, we would be the 16th largest economy in the world. We're about a $1.8 trillion economy. We're bigger than Saudi Arabia from a GDP standpoint. Next up is Spain. We think we're going to pass Spain sometime early 2026. After that will be Mexico. Canada is number 10 right now. And so if Florida does the right things, we can become the 10th largest economy in the world. And Kent, let me just be the first to say, no one cares more about the environment, clean air, clean water, clean land than the business community does, because who would want to work here? Who would want to move here if we weren't putting a premium on our quality of life? And I say that to say, I would be the first to say, we need to continue to plan better and grow smarter over the next 2.7 million people than we did over the last 2.7 million. And that's something that the business community is very focused on. We need more resiliency. We need to plan longer out in advance. And we're really starting to do that better than we have in Florida in the past.
Mark, is it some companies, some of the companies that I hear about saying, hey, this is important to us, the resiliency, environmental protection, those sorts of things? Or is it really everybody, whether those companies are talking about it or not?
Yeah, look, the Florida Chamber represents companies that's what they believe in. And so we believe, Florida Blue is a fantastic, company in our country. They're headquartered in Jacksonville, obviously. They're very involved in the Florida Chamber. And as they talk about all the time, they've actually chaired our Sustainability Council. And one thing that Florida Blue has taught us is you actually can grow your company and protect the environment at the same time. And Florida Blue is one of the best examples in the entire Southeast US of a company that's doing exactly that. Here you have a healthcare company and a wellness company that's actually putting a profit motive and a future-oriented goal in mind of how do we protect the environment and how do we protect our shareholders and policyholders at the same time. They're an inspiration to a lot of companies in Florida.
Mark, a couple other things I want to make sure we get to as we talk today on the podcast here. And this is Mark Wilson, President and CEO of the Florida Chamber of Commerce and Foundation. So I heard that there's a new thing. There's the inaugural Coolest Things Made in Florida competition. Tell me about this.
Yeah, we're talking about manufacturing. And, we're talking about if you ask the average Floridian or the average American, hey, what do you think about Florida? You typically will hear Florida's got the best tourism in the world, and we've got the best beaches, and we've got great agriculture and great construction. And thank God that we've got all three of those very important industries. One thing you don't hear a lot about is that Florida's a manufacturing state and an advanced manufacturing state. But turns out we're number one in the country for aerospace, and we're number 10 in the country for manufacturing jobs. And so remember, Kent, I said if Florida wants to be the 10th largest economy in the world by 2030, there's some things we have to focus on. One of them, for example, is cutting childhood poverty in half. One of them is getting all of our third graders to read at or above grade level by 2030. And one of them is we need to be top 5 in the country for manufacturing jobs. And we were 11, we just passed Georgia to be number 10 in the country for manufacturing jobs. And if you think about it, as the country focuses on reshoring manufacturing jobs and supply chains, when we've got great ports like Jacksport, why not put a big premium and focus on manufacturing jobs? In many communities, manufacturing jobs pay between $70,000 and $90,000 a year. And the average Floridian doesn't know that we actually make quite a bit of product right here in Florida, whether it's food or semiconductors or airplanes or rockets. We make and export quite a bit in Florida. So the coolest thing made in Florida competition is something we created this year so that manufacturers in all 67 counties could put their names forward, and then Floridians could actually vote on what do they think the coolest thing made in Florida is. So we had submissions, nominations from all over Florida. We have over 400,000 people who voted for their favorite product. And next week at the Florida Chamber's annual meeting and Future of Florida Forum, we're going to unveil who the winner is in our inaugural Coolest Thing Made in Florida. So about 400,000 people in Florida out of 10 million who work in the manufacturing sector. And Kent, one thing for your viewers and listeners to know is for every 10 manufacturing jobs we create in Florida, we create 20 other jobs in logistics, in warehousing, in finance, in legal. So manufacturing is one of the most important industries that we can invest in Florida.
You referenced when we're going to hear about the winners of this competition. Let me hear a little bit more about an event coming up very soon. This is the this year's Future of Florida Forum, or F3. Tell us what this is, and if somebody here in Northeast Florida wants to get involved, what they were supposed to do.
Yeah, of course. People can learn more at flchamber.com, which is, of course, the website of the Florida Chamber. This is our annual meeting, so it's our 2025 Florida Chamber of Commerce annual meeting. We also call it the Future of Florida Forum because, as you can imagine, we have over 70 speakers, and they're going to be talking about what does the future look like. It's the closest thing we have to a crystal ball. We have everybody from the space industry to retail to bio to universities to colleges to manufacturers, and we're going to be looking at where's the world going to be a couple years from now? What about the Southeast U.S.? And more companies can't. We live in a crazy world right now where everyone's trying to make sense out of all the data, the geopolitics, and everything. So the Future of Florida Forum is where business leaders come together. That's in Orlando this year to talk about, what can we make sense of and what can we make decisions based off of when we talk about the future of Florida. So our Attorney General will be there, our Chief Financial Officer. So many business leaders and political leaders will be there to talk through what does the future of Florida look like and how can businesses leverage it and benefit from it.
As I was doing some of my research, and as we've done this podcast for a while now, I know there are a couple of either challenges or threats, however you look at that, to doing business and to the growth and to becoming that 10th largest economy in the world that is a goal. One of those things is the insurance environment, and then the other is the housing environment. What kind of things are being done to address those key issues?
Yeah, Kent, those are serious issues. And we have 67 counties. And I mentioned we're going to add 2.7 million more people in Florida. And of course, that kind of upward pressure usually puts an upward premium on affordability of housing as well. We have some counties like Monroe County in the Keys, where the median listing home price is over $1.2 million. And then we have other counties in the panhandle of Florida where the median listing price is just over $200,000. So we have to be careful with averages, and every region of Florida is a little bit different. But Kent, to your point, we have had in the past a massive lawsuit abuse problem in Florida, where as you drive around Florida, you see all these billboards telling you to sue someone. And in fact, as I've often said, we have more billboards telling you to sue someone than any country in the world does. And the reason I bring that up is when you have too many frivolous lawsuits, when we're inviting that, it drives up the cost of auto insurance and it drives up the price of homeowners insurance. And just a quick number for you, Kent, and I know we're short on time. Before the reforms of 2023, we had insurance carriers, both auto and property, leaving Florida because they could not manage the risk of the lawsuits. They could manage the risk of hurricanes and manage the risk of storms, but there was no way to manage the risk of lawsuits. And here's a number for your viewers, Kent. In 2023, the last numbers before the reforms, Florida had 7% of the nation's lawsuits on homeowners insurance, but we had 76% of the nation's lawsuits on homeowners insurance. And what that says is that you and I were paying significantly higher premiums because the costs of the premiums attributed to lawsuits were just through the roof. And that's not fair to homeowners. It's not fair to insurance companies, and it's driving up the costs for everyone. Massive reforms in 2023. Governor DeSantis led most of them. He signed them into law. We now have, last count I saw, 17 or 18 new insurance companies have moved back into the Florida market. On the homeowners alone, we have over 50 carriers that have put in for no rate increase whatsoever. We have new auto insurance carriers coming back into the market, and most of your viewers have experienced decreasing homeowners insurance and auto insurance rates over the last year. And those reforms are really starting to take hold. So we'll still only be about average. We think we're middle of the pack when you compare us to all 50 states. And so that there's a lot of good news in terms of the market reforms are working, and we're seeing more and more carriers come in, which means more competition and more choices for consumers. And that means lower prices as long as we can continue to mitigate the costs.
So, Mark, let's wrap up here. What's your word to Jacksonville or Northeast Florida business and community leaders, especially as we head into what's happening next week with the Future of Florida Forum?
Yeah, thanks for that. The Florida Chamber of Commerce would encourage every local business leader in Northeast Florida to continue to put the long term ahead of the short term. And remember, there's not a lot we can impact in the next month or two, but there's a lot we can impact in the next 3 to 5 years. And just in Duval County alone, I mentioned you need to create over 75,000 new jobs by 2030. But I was looking at this. You've got over 45,000 children in poverty in Duval County alone. So our state's creating 1 out of every 11 new jobs in the country, but over 45,000 kids in poverty in Duval alone. And so if I were a local employer, I would be asking, hey, what can I do to offer employment opportunities to people who are trying to work their way out of poverty? And again, that number, 45,000, that's 45,000 kids in poverty. And their parents need job training. Their parents need good jobs. And in Florida, we have, as I mentioned, more open jobs than people looking for work. So if we really want to look at economic development, when I look at what Shad Khan's doing, when I look at the downtown redevelopment, like I said, if Jacksonville, was a stock, I'd be buying it. But what I'd really like us to do is look at early learning, kindergarten readiness, 3rd grade reading, childhood poverty. When the private sector can create economic opportunity and bring excellence in education to neighborhoods where it otherwise wouldn't be, we are going to see economic development take place like we've never seen before. And I think the Jacksonville business community cares deeply about the future of the community. And people around Florida talk about how serious business leaders in Jacksonville are. And I'm glad to be part of it. And I appreciate the time today, Kent. Thanks.
Now, Mark, is it too late for somebody to say, yeah, I do want to attend?
No, not at all. There's actually 2 ways. At flchamber.com, at the Florida Chamber's website, we're almost sold out in person. There's a few days left on that, but we also have opened up a virtual option. So more and more companies are actually buying a pass and having their management team dial in for the 2 days to see the speakers that they want to hear. So there's two options available at flchamber.com.
All right. Hey, Mark Wilson, the option to speak to you today. I'm so glad I took that one. Very good to visit with you again. We appreciate some of your insights, not just about our region, but all across the state. Thanks for appearing on the podcast today.
Thank you, Kent. Anytime. Appreciate it.
And thanks to all of you for listening or watching This Week in Jacksonville Business Edition. And a reminder, you can find us wherever you get your podcasts. And when you do, like, subscribe, or follow. New episodes come out every Thursday at 9 a.m.